Hey guys, it's Yorkie here and welcome to another iRacing race. This time round we're at the Mazda Raceway Laguna Seca, a track very well known, especially for the corkscrew. That's probably its most famous corner, but it does feature in a lot of other games, including Project Cars. And yeah, we're in the Mazda MX-5 Cups again. This is my second race that I did. The first one was at Lime Raceway and it has featured previously on the channel. As you can see, I'm starting in P12, which is actually the back of the grid. I didn't qualify, it was just a case of just jumping into the race. Basically the idea is to work my way through the field, avoiding all the collisions and traffic, or should I say the collisions, and see how high we can get. So just waiting for that green light to drop. There it is, getting another decent launch off the line. Much better reaction times again than the people around me, especially that white Mazda that I've slipped past. I almost said Mazda, and slipping around the outside of another guy there. So we're up into P10 already. Just going to take it fairly steady into turn one, just seeing where we can gain the odd place here or there. Avoid making any contact down the inside of this guy into the third corner. He's squeezing me out a little bit, so just kind of rode the brakes and let him slip through. Obviously I just want to settle down into this race. I don't want to push too hard, as we've got 10 laps around this circuit. The average lap time for me at this stage was, well, one of my best lap times was 1:45. It's roughly about 1:45, 1:46 was my average lap time for this race, and he's had a poor run coming through that left-hander. It's giving me the run down into this left-handed kink here. This isn't usually an overtaking position, but I'm down on the inside and he rather sensibly backs out of it. I kind of forced him to do that a little bit, but that's obviously going to compromise me with a run up the hill here. Not really gaining too much speed, and the guy behind has closed the gap a fair bit. So it looks like a couple of guys is getting a little bit of contact. A couple of the cars fairly slow. There's this guy here, everyone's slipping up the inside, and there's kind of a bit of a spacer here, but there's a very small amount of contact, but no penalty points for that. It was rather cheeky of me, to be honest, to try and slip up what was a rather diminishing gap. It's kind of running out of room, but he was so slow, and I thought I could make it. That contact basically just made the car unsettle ever so slightly. He's going to squeeze me out, and there is my first ever penalty point, or SR point, as they are known, against my name in basically what I've done so far in iRacing. Like I said, this was my only second race, and to be honest, that was a little bit unfair. There wasn't really much I could do. I was just kind of trying to avoid the guy on my left hand side there, and it kind of squeezed me out a little bit. It was a little bit cheeky. I suppose it was a little bit cheeky of me trying to send it up the inside of him in that long left hander after the corkscrew. But anyway, we are up into P7 now, so we're gaining a good 5 places within the first lap. Obviously you want to try and settle it down. It's been fairly action-packed so far, as you can see the guys in front of me jostling for position there. So we're closing the gap up to those at a fairly steady rate. It looks like the guy has had a knock from behind. As you can see, his car isn't quite as in proportion as it was before, so he's obviously had contact somewhere along the line, and I'm now just trying to take it fairly smooth, fairly steady. Obviously I've got 1 penalty point to my name now, and I don't really want to lose any more if possible. So obviously again, keeping within my own limits, as it looks like the guy's getting fairly close. He's had a pretty poor run coming through that corkscrew, which is giving me an opportunity to look around the outside here, but it's quite a long way round into this corner, but it will give me a fairly decent run out of the exit. As you can see there, again I'm on the outside, but there's not really any chance to hang it on out there. Obviously the corner is cambered in quite nicely, but the optimum line is to be well on the inside, as you do gain a fair bit of time in there. But I've had a much better run through the final corner than he has, and it's just purely trying to pick up the slipstream, if any at all. Coming down this start-finish straight to start lap 3 and see if we can have a move down into the first turn, or the first proper real braking zone. But it looks like we're fairly evenly matched, although it does go a little bit deep, but then that isn't too bad, as it allows you to hook up quite a nice tight line coming through the second part of that corner. But obviously I'm sat right now on his rear bumper, and we're just trying to keep it fairly smooth. I don't want to do anything too irrational, and just see if I can pick out a better line and get a better run out of a corner somewhere along the line to see if I can get the opportunity to try and make an overtaking manoeuvre. Here is not the place, though he has gone deep into there, which has allowed me to slip up the inside on the exit of the corner, having to hover on the throttle ever so slightly, and I'm on the inside again for this left-handed kick. Again, this isn't an overtaking place. I don't want to be doing this, but he's going to back out quite sensibly. Oh dear. Putting other drivers under pressure, and this is very, very cheeky of me, to be honest, pulling that move off twice in that race. But obviously if my car is far enough alongside, then why not? The corner's near enough mine. Oh dear. It purely are relying on the other person to back out. If they don't, it's just going to end horribly. It's just going to end up in carnage. You're going to make contact. Both of you are probably going to end off the road, and it's not too much of a wise move to be doing. It's very, very risky, but it's paid off so far in this race. So yeah, slipping up another position, slipping up into P6 as we start the 4th lap. We've got a little bit of a gap to P5. He is 2.6 seconds ahead, 2.7. We're just going to come now down into the first real braking zone. Obviously, this being my second race, it's fairly early on, and obviously since then my driving line and my lap times have improved. Looking through some of these corners, it could be a fair bit tighter to a number of places. Don't have to touch a brake in a number of places, just instead just lift off the accelerator and coast the car through. Obviously learning that from watching other people who have been setting faster lap times. Like I said, around about this time my fastest lap time was a 1:45.0, I believe. I've now dipped down into the 1:43s. The top drivers apparently are getting into 1:42s at the time. I thought that was absolutely ridiculous, absolutely impossible, and kind of I still think that as my optimal lap time is a low 1:43, and I can't really seem to find any more time anywhere else. And it looks like obviously we're closing up to the guys in front who have been jostling for position, so slipping closer to those guys, obviously within the second to the car in front, who has had an off somewhere along the line, or a little bit of contact, as he's gone and lost an awful lot of time in a number of positions. And that was a terrible run into that final corner, braking a little bit too late and going a little bit too deep, but still we're about 0.5, 0.6 seconds to the person in front. I accidentally pressed up on my D-pad there, which has brought up this lap counter, so you can see essentially what kind of times I'm doing compared to other lap times. It looks like the two guys up ahead, I believe that's third and also fourth, have gone and made contact, and one of them slipped off onto the inside there, recovering via the pit exit, which has allowed me to slip up into P5, which is good. As top 5 finishes are always welcome, especially if you're starting down in P12 and it's only your second race in the game. As you can see, getting fairly close to the guy in front. Not really any opportunity to try and have a look into this left-handed king coming out the exit of that corner. So just instead settling behind him, just moving ever so slightly to the left, just to see if I can pick up my reference point for the turning in point of that corner. As being that close, it is very difficult to see around the car in front. So I didn't want to rely on him too much, as obviously us being in a mixture of rookie and also various other class races, our experience within the game varies an awful lot. Knowledge of track and also the car would vary an awful lot, as it's gone very, very wide, which is allowing me to have a look down the outside into this hairpin, but there isn't really much room to go around the outside there. Did kind of want to do an undercut, but not quite feeling too confident that I would have pulled it off without making any contact, so just a little bit more hesitant on the initial turning, so instead just going to settle in behind him. Like the driver said, also the pit engineer said, we've got 5 laps to go. It's lap 6 out of 10, and he's gone very, very deep, which is going to give me a slight opportunity to look up the inside here. It does squeeze me out a little bit, but then just about managed to see me coming and giving me a little bit more room, but still not quite there to make a passing manoeuvre. So settling in behind him just for the moment, as it looks like we've got a fair bit of a better run coming out through the exit of that corner, carrying a fair bit more speed and getting on the accelerator early. Just giving me a good opportunity to look to the inside into this corner, braking pretty much at the same time, but he's gone and conceded the position, backed out quite nicely and allowing me to slip up the inside. So that's us up into P4. We want to try and see if we can get a podium position here. That would be very welcome indeed. He's coming to this left-handed king. It is really quite tricky trying to carry the speed through that corner, as it looks like the guy behind us had a fair better run. I want to try and defend the inside line as he comes up to my right here, and well, I was expecting him to back out ever so slightly through that very small right-handed kink, and I was expecting to keep the position coming into that corner, but he's just going to slip up the inside and swept across my nose there. Also did try and have a little bit of a look here, applying the pressure onto him. And we're losing time to the guy in front, which isn't good, and also the guy behind is catching me up again. The guy is going to run wide, and I've had a much better run, but he's again on the inside here, so undercut this time. Not quite again, still not 100% confident that I would have done it without making any contact. So settling in behind him, it looks like we're a fair bit closer this time, which is going to allow me to pick up a slipstream. The guy behind isn't too far away either. And I'm now moving to the inside, he's squeezing me over there. I just want to keep my nose inside, get the inside line into this corner, using the braking zone very, very tight, settling on the brakes there, just holding it in and managing to pull that move off without making any contact. So very good driving by him, allowing me just enough room that I needed to keep it on the inside and not understeer too much away from the apex of the corner. So now it's got you got to focus on the guy ahead and not so much on the guys behind us. They are battling, which is allowing me to get a little bit of breathing room, and obviously putting my eyes forward as the car does step out ever so slightly upon initial turn-in, having to ride the brakes ever so slightly more to keep the car in check. Obviously giving a little bit of opposite lock just to keep the car under wraps, and getting a much better run through that left-handed kink this time, and actually closing the gap up quite nicely to the person in front. So yeah, focus on him. Let's see if we can get this third position before the end of the race. We've only got a few more laps to do it as we're coming into the latter part of the race. So obviously still trying to be fairly smooth, fairly consistent, and not throw anything away. Obviously I do have 1 point to my name now, 1 incident safety rating point. I don't want to throw away any more. So hooking up the final corner fairly nicely. As you can see, the gap up the top there, just below the rear view mirror, is to my best lap time. So obviously having a fair bit of a better run coming out the final corner is allowing me to pull a gap ever so slightly, also down into this braking zone as well. But it's not as tight as to previous laps have been. We've gone and lost time in the first corner, but we are still closing the gap to the guy ahead. That is the important bit, not so much to my personal best lap time. So just trying to be fairly smooth and consistent, as you can see, not trying to push the track limits too hard. Fairly decent run through most of these corners. Could be a little bit better in most places, but like I said, we are closing the gap to the guy ahead, who is now only a second in front of us. It looks a fair bit closer because of the Constantina effect coming into the braking zones. It will pull away ever so slightly, coming through the acceleration and the exit of the corners, and it looks like he's going to run very, very wide. And also looks like P2 has also had an off somewhere along the line. There was a fair bit of dust. He's going to run very wide again, and it's definitely a penalty point out there. And he's gone way too deep into this corner with a load of dirt on his tyres, and obviously feeling the pressure. And he probably also got a little bit annoyed with himself, trying to push hard, trying to maintain a gap and making a few mistakes. So unfortunate for him as we've gone on, slipped up into P3 without too much of a battle. So now we're going to see if we can try and close down to P2. He is only 2.7 seconds up the road. P1 is way out of the question. He's 8.5 seconds up ahead of us. So unless he basically spins off and crashes, there's no way in hell that we're going to be able to get past him. But we may, if we're smooth enough and consistent and quick enough, we may be able to close the gap to the guy ahead and see if we can have a small opportunity at second position, especially if I'm getting a fairly decent run through that corner and closing the gap to him through there. Gained a couple attempts. See if we gain anything through here. Trying to maintain as much speed as possible. As you can see, the gap is actually dropping fairly nicely now as I'm carrying the momentum up the hill. Gained about half a second through that corner, slightly more. As we come now into the corkscrew. Very difficult corner. Obviously the car going light midway through, and with a fair amount of steering lock on, the car did step out ever so slightly, but we're managing to keep it in check quite nicely, and all the same closing the gap to the guy ahead. He's now 1.6 seconds. Let's see if we can close it a little bit more into the final corner as we get the white flag there to say that we're starting the last lap. And yeah, we've gained a good 1.5 seconds at least in that lap. So if we could do that again, we may be able to have a chance coming into the final corner and see if we can snatch away second place from him. Obviously I want to do it cleanly, I don't want to make any contact. And coming into the first couple of turns here, not a great initial first entry, but the second part wasn't too bad. Still maintaining the gap, gained a couple of attempts through that sequence of corners, and again being a fair bit tighter to the apex and the inside curb there. And then the guy in front, as you can see, I'm also up on my personal best lap time. Again, much tighter than he was, able to carry a fair bit more speed and momentum, and down to half a second, ever so slightly less than that. So it looks like we're going to be able to close him fairly early on, coming through the corners here. Lost a fair bit of momentum there, accidentally shifted up into P5, into 5th gear, sorry, into the braking zone there, which made me run a little bit deep and run a little bit too far into the corner, but I've had a much better run than him through that corner, and I now want to carry a fair bit more speed coming up here. I'm going to try and attempt the same move that the guy pulled off on me, to try and keep it fairly tight through here, but he actually stayed in the throttle whilst I backed out, and that's allowed him to maintain the position there. And this is going to be fairly difficult, trying to keep the gap fairly close and try and present myself with an opportunity into the final corner. They've got to be smooth through that corner, got to be smooth through here as well. It looks like I've done a much better run than him, but we're a little bit too far back into the braking zone. That's the braking there, and it doesn't look like we're going to have anything to have a go into the apex. Maybe something coming out through the X, but no, it looks fairly even Stevens coming up to the start finish line, and it looks like we're going to settle for a third position there, starting from 12th. So a very happy race, 1 penalty point to my name, not too bothered about that. Obviously
great job, you did
was,
really well.
A little bit questionable considering I was trying to avoid someone, but then again it couldn't have been helped. But yeah, great race. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that. Please leave a rating. If you have any comments or questions, of course, feel free to leave them below, and hopefully I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks very much for watching. Take care.